as shown in parts 1 and 2 of Egyptians in Australia. On this very coast, it is told by local Origine elders and written in stone on the walls here that some 4,500 years ago, 2 sons of an Egyptian pharaoh came here and were stranded. One of the sons was bitten by a snake on 2 occasions, died, and was buried here. In this recently filmed footage, Steve Strong with Gavin Bragg and others interpret new glyphs and investigate the burial chamber. Along the way, they uncover deeper and more irrefutable proof of an ancient connection between cultures and their celestial origins.
That have never been found before. This was only discovered this year. No one's made a claim that this is actually a fake, and it isn't. It is much smaller than the other one, and what we've found is we've looked at these glyphs and the others, and I see a bit of a story there. Of the 9 glyphs we've found here, 4 I recognise as Proto-Egyptian, the rest I don't recognise at all. That's 44%, and we've got other walls that run up at 44%. We believe this is the more ancient writing that Arnie Bev spoke about. What I can tell you about this one is there's a couple of glyphs that I do recognise, and they're quite important. The first one here is the one for coffin. That is the correct glyph for coffin. You've got the line there, the round piece here. That is coffin. Below we recognise something as being half, and the fascinating one is over here. This represents door, and this little icon above is supposed to represent back. Back door, coffin, half. The rest I do not recognise because it's not in the actual book that Ray gave us. The couple we've got on the other side, one of those is recognisable, which is over here. That one is recognised, which means germination or shooting up. There is no glyph for this one. There is one for that, which is drought, but it's the other way around, so we're going to have to put those 2 as a no. That one is a yes. And over here, there's 2 there, and we've got a couple more here. We recognise a 3rd one there, so we're around underneath 50% again. What's really important about this panel of glyphs is, remember Arnie Bev said, the more ancient writing that is near that is ours. This for me is part of the more ancient writing. It is near where the wall is, therefore it must be, as Arnie Bev said, ours. This is an original script. You will notice that this is much smaller, but we do recognise that as being exactly as a coffin. Now I suspect, after looking at this in more detail, I originally thought this might have been put in by the Egyptians to tell us where the coffin is. It is not. This is the ancient writing Arnie Bev spoke about, and perhaps they're telling us in there that somewhere near the back door there may be a coffin. That may be their account of what's taking place there, but because it's been taken away from the walls, and I believe the Egyptians only had one section of that wall that was theirs, this must be the more ancient writing that Arnie Bev spoke about, and because we can't get 50%, less than 50% of this is Proto-Egyptian, it must be, like we said before, original script. Very, very important. No one has found this until Jake Cassar found this earlier this year, and what we're seeing now is the first time anyone has ever had this filmed. The deranged Czech or the Sydney Uni students were always claimed to be between the 2 walls. Nobody ever claimed they wandered off through the bush and made up other markings. This is in a very difficult place to find, and what we're really lucky about, can you see the ledge above? If the water comes down here, it will actually go straight down and miss this panel. That's why it stayed. It's a sheer panel above. We're protected. There's an enclave on the other side to protect it from the wind. This is as close as you're going to get to something that's shielded and protected. I have no doubt this is original writing. None whatsoever. So we now have another part of this long and involved story. This is their chronicling of what took place over there, and to remind us one day when we found it, as we have now, that they were the first people to write and create language. The Egyptians came here to learn this skill. This is part of that same narrative. And we also know, in closing, there is another tablet somewhere in the bush that has 23 ancient glyphs like this again, and I suspect they will also be one Auntie Bev spoke about. So we now have two separate panels that don't belong to the glyphs. So I can tell you now, this story about it being a fake, if they want it to be a fake, they have to include this in their fake story. They never included it because they didn't know about it. This is legitimate. And for me, along with the shaft we've just found, this is absolute proof there is more to this story than a simple story of some white fella and their mischievous deeds, some anonymous white fella. Remember this, we've never had a name for whoever did this. I've got a name for this, the original people, talking about the Egyptian people. And if we go around to the other side, we will find the Egyptian story.
Directly behind the glyphs, there's a rectangular hole in the ground that leads under the rock where the glyphs are etched on. It's been dug up by others before. Gavin explains more.
So here we're sitting on a rubble pile that we discovered yesterday when we came up to the glyphs. Someone has pulled out an enormous amount of stone, including these blocks, which would weigh up to a few hundred kilos. These ones here, beautifully flat, beautifully smooth rocks. And here we find the shaft. So someone's dug a tunnel out, and when you go down in the hole, you find a shaft that goes to your left here. It continues on for about 10 metres, with two other points down there which are quite small that you can actually put your arm into, and you can see from this point in here. And once you go further down, it goes down and under a lip. If you look under that lip, it opens up into a chamber. The chamber is quite large enough to park a car in, probably 3 or 4 metres wide by 3 metres deep. We are unknown depth at this point because it's full of rubble, but what you can see is it goes down again into another chamber. You can see it go down again and into another lip. So at this point we have no idea what's inside the chambers, but certainly proof of someone with some marvellous rock carving skills. We've come from up here and we've come down into the first cavern. See?
Note the flat surfaces and the straight walls and right angles.
We come back here a bit, come down, and we see the first lip.
Here, Gavin manoeuvres down to another level and another room.
See the roof of the second room? And in this corner.
It looks like the top of a door to another room. Note the right angles and the heavy lintel.
You can see that it goes underneath into a third room. This is the second chamber again. See if we can get a better view. Looking into the third room. You can see the roof has caved in.
There seem to be two different types of stone here, melded together from the fallen roof.
It's one of the parts of the roof here fallen in.
Gavin didn't want to go any further because of the smell of methane, so that was it for there.
Land of my dreaming, land of my birthright, land of my sovereignty.
Okay, what we've got here is we're we're above the glyphs, we're about 50 metres above the glyphs, and many people, when they discuss the glyphs, do not include this in the conversation. Now what happened with this is a gentleman by the name of Paul White came and looked at the glyphs in the 1990s, and a lady by the name of Michelle went above the glyphs to look around, and she found these circles. There's 1, 2, 3 of them there, and she marked them, and there's actually quite a few more as you go up the hill there, and I'll point to a couple now. We've got one up here, another one there, and they run all the way up, and there's another one further up. Now here's the trick with these circles. They're star markers. They mark out the stars. Now very cleverly, Paul White got this looked at by Sydney Uni, and they put it through what's called astrocartography software. And they found that this marking of the stars coincided exactly with how the night sky was 4,500 years ago. That is very, very important, simply because 4,500 years ago is roughly the same time Nefertari and Nefertari came to this country. Now this is not Egyptian. The Egyptians mark out stars with a 5-armed star. They do not mark out stars like this, and you will notice the engraving here is not as sharp. This is being grooved in with axes, it's being grooved around there. So this is the original statement. We believe they were placed directly above the glyphs for one reason and only one reason, to affirm that those glyphs down there are not only genuine, but gave us a time signature to work with. Now here's the trick with these glyphs. We've looked around, and what we've found is there's about 10 or 12 on this plateau here, but we've looked further. And we're now up to 91 different sites. Now some of those sites have up to 8 or 9 star circles marked within it. Others are spread all over the place. Some are bowls that are dug into the surface. Some have got double circles. There's all types of variations on this game. All of them are astronomical markers. And at the moment, we've probably walked 400 metres up above there and probably about 200 metres that way. So maybe 800, 900 square metres so far. And we're up to 91 different sites, 91 constructed engravings. Some, we've got fish that could be 300 million years old. We've got a 1.5-legged man. There's all sorts of stuff. But within that, we're up to 91 different astronomical sites. So we know the original people, and we knew this from way back, are great astronomers. But this particular set of sites here, when you put it directly next to the glyphs, tells us a story that we're only just beginning to get our heads around. The original people were leaving signs for us to validate what's down there. What is up here is the same as what's down there. It's part of the same story. And we have to acknowledge, if you want to talk about the glyphs, you best talk about what I'm standing next to right now. These markers were deliberately put in here 4,500 years ago to tell us that something new had happened in their country, something they agreed with, something they were comfortable with. On this part of the story, if we're going to talk about down there, we have to talk about, as the original people say often, as is below, as is on top. They talk about on top all the time. This is part of the on top story. Here we learn about the astronomical skills, and we wonder, the Egyptians, where did they learn astronomy? I think the same answer turns up each time. Where did they learn their writing? Same answer turns up again. We're talking with another linguist, a very respected linguist, and we'll get to him later, who claims all languages come from Australia. Where did we learn to talk? Same answer again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the beginning of civilization. What you're looking at here is the first vestiges, the beginning of us looking elsewhere and thinking elsewhere.
As time goes on, it's becoming more apparent that the Kariong glyphs reveal a much deeper story than has previously been acknowledged. This is the story of the significant relationship between two ancient cultures, one relatively young and the other a more ancient original culture, still alive to share their stories today. Thanks mostly to the recent sharing of cultural artefacts and sites by Origine Elders, the Kariong Glyphs are one example of nearly 100 pieces of evidence that Steve Strong has collected to back up his Egyptians in Australia theory. Academia can no longer afford to ignore these findings. More studies need to be done. This story, in fact, pans out to celestial dimensions and the forgotten origin of our species.